Start off by responding to a few items that the opposition critic raised in his opening comments last week. My goal as minister has always been to strengthen BC's food system, to help farmers farm, to protect farmland, and to get more farmland into production. And we're making great strides, which is contrary to the critic's doom and gloom scenario that he portrayed last week. We've seen record amounts of revenue in recent years, with $15.5 billion from agriculture, seafood, and food and beverage processing in 2019. This creates good jobs, and we now have over 64,000 British Columbians working in these sectors. In addition to our budget lift, which is more than the opposition provided this great ministry, we also received $10 million as part of our government's Stronger BC Economic Recovery Plan. This funding resulted in programs like our Small Farm Business Acceleration Program, which helped 64 small and new farmers in 54 different communities get business plan coaching and cost-shared funding for new farm infrastructure and equipment. It helped fund programs like the Food Business Refresh Program that allowed businesses to pivot their business models with support for new equipment and access to customized training and business coaching. And it helped expand our BC Food Hub network, which now has 12 regional hubs, either open or in development, that will allow entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, strengthen food security in communities, and create jobs and help local economies thrive. We're also providing support for our farmers through our temporary foreign worker quarantine program, $17 million last year, and $35 million allocated for this year to ensure these much needed workers can come to BC, safely quarantine for 14 days, and then go to farms around BC to help ensure crops are harvested and keep our local supply chain going. This program is seen as a great success by other jurisdictions, as well as by the Mexican consulate. We have prevented numerous community outbreaks of COVID-19 due to our proactivity on this issue. The critic mentions residential flexibility on the ALR, as well as our modernization of rural meat production in BC. He knows these have been long-standing issues, and our government has taken the time to consult with everyone affected so we can achieve the best results. Unfortunately, the pandemic has delayed the timing somewhat, but we're on track and we will be having announcements on both these items this summer. For residential flexibility, we believe we have arrived at a place that there will be more flexibility to help farming families thrive while benefiting non-farmers living in the ALR as well. New rules will help streamline approval for a small secondary residence, which can be used for anything from farm labor to an agritourism accommodation, and they only need to get approval from local government. Farming families already have a path forward at the ALC for multiple and larger homes if they're necessary for farming purposes. And as far as our meat regulations, we've already increased opportunities for more local meat sales last year in certain communities, and we've also supported rural abattoirs through an updated training program that includes development of improved food safety and humane animal welfare plans specific to each operation. And our next step will be to prioritize health and safety while increasing regional food security by allowing more opportunities for small-scale producers. And in terms of food processing on the ALR, our government supports value-added businesses on the ALR 100%, but they must meet the business licensing requirements and comply with bylaws of local government and the criteria of the ALC. The rules regarding food processing in the ALR were put in place by the former government, the BC Liberal government, and only changed since 2017 is that now it's easier for breweries and distilleries to operate within the ALR. Our government is going to continue to grow opportunities for farmers, ranchers, and producers through Grow BC, Feed BC, and Buy BC, so that we can expand our local food production in the province, increase access to local food in our public institutions, and bring increased prosperity and economic stability to farmers and increase food security to all British Columbians. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize the member for Delta South.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that speech. However, my opening statement the other day, last Thursday, I've listed off I think about 17 different things that I've been brought to my attention, including Bill 52, Bill 15, the protests at the legislature, petitions. Madam Chair, through you to the minister, I'm not making this up. People that are waiting and waiting and waiting on intentions papers, for abattoirs, small meat production, nothing on the Trust Act, nothing on Brunswick Point. You can't make this stuff up, and I'm not making this stuff up. Just this morning, this comes to me as another petition. We've already had one. Back in February of 2019, Bill 52, changes to Bill 52 Facebook site. 4,400 members come along and are now on that Facebook site. A protest at the legislature at the back steps on October of 2019. 31,000 names on a petition what I presented to the legislature. Madam Chair, through you to the minister, now I come across Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Stop holding back British Columbia's farms. To the Minister of Agriculture, farms in BC's Agricultural Land Reserve are being hamstrung by the restrictive measures laid out in Bill 52 and Bill 15. By imposing costly and restrictive regulations on farmers, the BC government has severely hampered farmers' viability and innovation. It is also discouraging the next generation of farmers from entering the agricultural sector. They're calling on the minister to, 1, amend Bill 52 to allow small farms the ability to make a modest secondary income from their farms. 2, protect family farms by allowing small farms to build reasonably sized secondary homes. 3, repeal Bill 15. Farmers are people and deserve a right to manage their private property like everyone else. And 4, reduce red tape at the farm gate to encourage innovation and new value-added opportunities. So through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister of Agriculture, do you find it concerning or embarrassing to be the part of 2 massive petitions, and will you respond to these 4 items that are written at the back of this petition?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess first off, the question was, am I embarrassed or concerned? I'm absolutely not. I'm very proud of the record that our government has. And I guess I'm a bit concerned because the member very well knows that some of those issues that he's mentioned are misleading and they're not true. some of the examples he gave from the petition you can already do. So I find it, I feel like I should offer the critic many more briefings so he can get up to speed. But when he says that young farmers aren't interested in farming, I can tell you that just this weekend I visited a brand new farm where that was made possible through the BC Land Matching Program. We have thousands of acres going back into production with new and young farmers. They're getting the business supports they need. They're getting programming support they need. That's just one of the things. As far as supporting farmers, the member will know that we have a very successful program called Feed BC, which is tapping right into primary goods and value added. Within communities across the province. We have 13 of those hubs now up and going and under development. And so I feel like the critic, perhaps he doesn't want to understand, but we could go, line by line through the budget to show the supports that have been put in place. I've read my opening statement about the opportunities that will come with the regulations in Bill 52, and so, I take note that the critic and his colleagues continue to say that Bill 15 took away rights for farmers to apply to do things on their land, but that's absolutely not true. There's only one area where a farmer has to go through local government, First Nations government, and that's on a land exclusion. Everything else is farmer and landowner driven. So I think if we're going to be having a discussion, I think we need to get the facts straight. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we proceed to the next question, member, just a reminder to everybody as we're starting off the day that the legislation is not within the purview of Committee of Supply. Now I will recognize the member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, through you to the Minister, I get email after email after email after phone call, and just this morning I get another email regarding Bill 52, and this is from a family up in the Comox Valley, and it's just typical of all the emails that I get sent. They purchased an 11-acre farm up in the Comox Valley. The land was not being used for farming, and it came along with a 940 square foot small home. They wanted to get somebody onto that farm to start off with their farming operations, so they decided to try and find a family who might want to help setting up the farm and working on the farm for them. They found the perfect family with some children, some dogs, and they're doing a fantastic job. So then it was not until they went to apply for permits to build their new house on that 11-acre property, they were made aware that they could not have the other people living there. The lady said, "I was sick to my stomach when I found this out. Not only was it our dream of a blueberry farm being compromised, but so was theirs." So through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, here is a typical example that I've gotten from all over the province of people that are not allowed to go ahead and build a home with an existing small home on the property.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's hard to kind of imagine the scenario because I don't have the facts in front of me. I don't know the process that was used, but from what the critic has said, to me it seems like they went to City Hall or local government. It doesn't sound like there was an application before the Agricultural Land Commission. The Commission makes their decisions on a case-by-case basis, so unless the critic has more information he would like to share.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll move on through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister. Getting back to the budget, 60,000 new public service workers in British Columbia. How many of those will be added to the Agriculture Ministry?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So currently we have about 451 people working within the Ministry of Agriculture around the province. We are currently hiring 5, and of course we manage it very well, and so there will be new hires in the future.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to the Minister. So what areas of the Ministry of Agriculture would the new hirees be?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 3 of the 5 that I mentioned will go to the Agricultural Land Commission, and then there's 2 other positions that will fill in within each division in the ministry. And then as we see a need, we can continue to hire. But I have to say we have a very comprehensive team. We call it the B team, B-E-E. The B team is larger than it's ever been in the history of the Ministry of Agriculture, and I'm proud to be able to expand our departments and our work and make sure that the resources are available for farmers around the province.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, I believe with Bill 52, there was also legislation on soil removal and illegal fill putting on farmland, which is certainly a good thing. In my municipality of Delta, we'd already dealt with that through our own bylaws department and a soil watch program we had for farmers and residents to keep an eye out for things that were happening nefariously late at night with illegal fill coming into our farms. So we've basically dealt with that. But I think it was a bit of another Ministry of Agricultural backtrack when they realized that long gravel driveways on farms and ranches in the interior part of British Columbia needed to have more than the allotted amount of gravel brought in each year to repair and fill potholes on driveways. So that was another backup. My question through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister: what enforcement of illegal soil removal or illegal dumping is in place through the ALC? How many officers are in place now to conduct surveillance of this matter? And how many infractions took place in 2020? And sorry, the final one, what are the penalties if you are caught illegally bringing in fill material onto farmland?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The ALC Compliance and Enforcement Program was established in 2007 in response to increasing complaints of non-compliant activities in the ALR. In 2019, 2 additional officers were hired. In total, the C&E program consists of 7 officers, including 1 supervisor, and 1 program advisor responsible for taking all of the intakes. There is 1 officer based in Nanaimo, 1 officer based in Kamloops, 1 officer based in Kelowna, and 2 in Burnaby. At the start of the fiscal, there were 4 officers based in Burnaby, but 2 officers left mid-2020 to join other government agencies, creating vacancies. 1 position was posted in January 2021, and the 2nd position remains vacant due to constraints currently. From March to July 2020, the ALC C&E officers worked with the Ministry of Agriculture to inspect temporary foreign worker accommodations in the South Coast, the Okanagan, and Vancouver Island, and the Vancouver Island region. As of February 19th, 2021, there are currently 287 active complaints and 270 active referrals, 557 total, compared to a total of 476 active complaints and referrals at the end of 2019-2020. The active files load is currently 17% higher than the total for the fiscal last year. Enforcement actions are down this fiscal as compared to last fiscal due to temporary foreign worker accommodation inspections and 1 staff vacancy.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister on some more ALC questions. Through you to the Minister, how many applications in 2020 were there made to the ALC for removal of land from the ALR, and how many of those were successful?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were 30 exclusion applications, and 57% of those applications were approved.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the minister, who said earlier that basically farmers in BC are pretty happy with Bill 52 and Bill 15. I suggested last Thursday that when Bill 15 came through, I went to a meeting along with some of the NDP MLA colleagues of hers at a Surrey banquet hall with over 500 South Asian farmers, absolutely furious, to the point where the NDP MLAs had to grab their coats and their purses and leave the facility. They were so mad about Bill 15. My question through you, Madam Chair, to the minister, why am I continuing, since Bill 15 was put in place and Bill 52, why am I continuing to see mega homes being built, especially on 16th Avenue, 8th Avenue, throughout Langley, Aldergrove, especially still in Richmond, which was a big call to end them in Richmond? Why am I still seeing them in the construction phases right now?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the critic is correct. There may be observed building activities going on the ALR as it pertains to homes that are over 500 meters squared. The reason would be that those applications or the building permits were already in process before the bill changed the legislation. Between April 1st, 2020 and February 15th, 2021, the ALC has decided 100 non-adhering residential use applications. 74% of all non-adhering residential applications have been approved by the ALC so far this fiscal. And then as far as additional residences larger than 500 meters squared, there's been 13 in total approved.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. That was going to be my next question, if you could perhaps confirm that. I'll ask it in a different way. When we see these monster homes that are continuing to be under construction in Richmond and parts of Langley, Surrey, Aldergrove, do you have people within compliance of the ALC that would check on those homes through the local municipality to see that they have approval for over 500 meters squared? And again, the question is, how many variances have been granted since Bill 52 went into effect for homes larger than 500 meters squared?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the member has been a part of local government, so he will rightly know that local governments are partners when it comes to building permits and enforcing permits that are in place. The ALC is a complaint-based process, and so much of the responsibility would lay on local government as far as making sure people were in compliance with their building permits. I don't have the stats going farther back than I've already mentioned, but it would absolutely be able to pull those for the member and get them to him as soon as possible.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so moving along to other issues regarding Bill 52, a quote that was sent to me, if the purpose of Bill 52 is to preserve the affordability of land for young farmers, the government should recognize that the capital requirement is already out of reach for most young people. A dependence on sharing land with parents and grandparents in BC is the rule, not the exception. We need residential flexibility to conserve farming in this province, and the government needs to act now. Lives have been altered and put on hold while waiting for the correction to these housing constraints. So my question, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, when can we expect clarity and concrete answers following the intentions paper of over 1 year ago? This dragging on has become ridiculous.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know the member is very critical of the legislative changes that our government made. I'm really happy with those changes. The legislative changes came forward with the intention of developing regulations to address what we heard as we traveled around the province and got input from folks. The ALR brings out a lot of passion in people, and it's a very old act. And so when you try and make regulatory changes, there's a lot to consider. But I think the success story is that we were able to move past some of that passion and get very, very good input from people in British Columbia. farmers, ranchers, food processors, and people that just want to live on the ALR that wouldn't be considered farmers. The opposition pushed very hard for non-farmers to have opportunities as well, and we listened to that. And so what I think will make the critic feel better is that this summer we will be able to look forward to some announcements around that flexibility on the ALR. It will address the opportunities for non-farmers who live on the ALR, and I think that's good news. We know that farmers already have opportunities on the ALR to build not just one house, two houses, but there's no limit to how many houses a farmer can build as long as the need is for farming. And we've also, we've probably modernized our way of thinking around what does it mean to help a farmer? What does farm help mean? Well, it can mean the traditional things that we think of. So somebody helping out in a field, driving a tractor, rounding up cattle, doing daily farm chores. But we also know it means supporting people who need to do child care for farmers. Maybe it's helping them out in other ways that aren't the traditional ways that we think. Farmers do have a lot of opportunities. I know that the member did mention that farmers are looking at ways to have secondary businesses operating on their farms. And that happens a lot around BC. There's tons of opportunities. Secondary businesses are part of farming. You can find mechanics bays on farms. As long as the farming activity is the primary activity, there is lots of opportunity. But I know the member was very concerned to make sure that people who don't farm have opportunities on the ALR, and I think we've come to a compromise and a direction that will help folks out.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister. I'm actually shocked at the statements I'm hearing. It was the Minister and her government that put in place Bill 52, which took away the rights of farmers to have a secondary home on their farm. If the Minister wants to see agriculture flourish in this province with small properties, and there's thousands and millions of small properties in BC with people that want to become farmers in a small scale way, but the hundreds of phone calls and emails I get are from people that go, this is our dream, is to start a small farm on 5 acres, but we need that second house for someone to help out with childcare. We have secondary jobs. We need that second house to help pay the mortgage so that we can start this farming operation. If we don't do that, we're going to end up with 5-acre farms all over the Fraser Valley that are fallow. There's nothing going on them. There might be a horse out the back. That's it. I'm astounded. Whether you're not getting the same emails that I'm getting for the last 3.5 years, it's astounding the comments that are coming out about backtracking now, saying, we put in place Bill 52 and now, we're willing to look at secondary homes. This was told back last fall that an intentions paper would be out in the new year, in January of 2021, and we're still waiting. People in the north need to have building permits and plans all in place to build their house before the poor weather comes this fall. So why is the intentions paper coming out this summer when it was promised to come out in January, February?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So there has been a lot of information that's been put out, and I'm surprised that the member doesn't know that. I think we've been very clear. There's been a pandemic in between the work that we've been doing, and although that might not, the member might be uncomfortable with that thought, that would slow a process down, but the Agriculture, Food and Fisheries file has been a really critical file as we've moved throughout the pandemic, making sure that people have food in BC, that the farm workers are arriving. All of that takes focus. And so if that's not acceptable to the member, I will accept that. But unfortunately, that's what happened. We were in a worldwide pandemic. We did ask for an extension on some of the work because of that, but I'll give the member the highlights on what's happened and the timeline so he can be more clear. In order to support farmers and non-farmers living in the ALR, government is considering regulatory changes to enable landowners to have both a principal residence and a small secondary residence on their property, provided they have approval from their local government. ALR property owners would not be required to apply to the ALC for approval for this smaller secondary unit. The ministry published a policies intentions paper, Residential Flexibility in the Agricultural Land Reserve, on January the 27th, 2020. That outlined options to increase residential flexibility by allowing ALR landowners to have both a principal residence and a small additional residence on their property. The policy intentions paper provided members of the public with an opportunity to provide feedback on the additional residence option under consideration until April 17th, 2020. An invitation to provide feedback on the paper was also given to local governments, and that invitation was extended to May 17th, 2020 due to COVID-19. The feedback received from the policies intentions paper has been summarized in a What We Heard document that formed part of an information bulletin that was released on September 4th, 2020. The ministry has analyzed the feedback received from the consultation process and is working through a technical review committee to use the information gathered to refine the options put forward in the policy intentions paper and to inform the policy and recommendations that were put forward for decision making. The technical review committee included the Ministry of Agricultural Land, the Ministry, the Agricultural Land Commission, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and the Union of BC Municipalities. We also put out a fact sheet dated April the 9th, 2021.
Just before I go to the next question, just a reminder for members to please direct all questions through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister. Let's get back to the pandemic being the reason. I don't believe the pandemic itself would be the reason for such a delay. The snap election under the pandemic is what shut government down and caused a delay in so many things in this province in the last year. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, my question is this. The fact that Bill 52 got put in place and now we're making all these intentions papers and comments from people and landowners in BC, tell me why the intentions paper and all the comments that could have avoided all this about housing flexibility wasn't put in place before the legislation of Bill 52 took place.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess we can discount the pandemic as being a reason because work slowed down, but that's the honest truth. It took a lot of focus from the most amazing team I have in the ministry. They had to shift their focus onto things like, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, they were making calls nonstop to every single stakeholder group that we had within the ministry, checking in on them day after day to make sure that they were okay and if we needed to respond to things. So that shifted the entire focus of the ministry. We had to deal with temporary foreign workers coming in, making sure they were safe, making sure the farms that they were heading to were able to follow COVID protocols. So it does take an enormous amount of work, and I credit the folks that worked in the ministry and worked long, hard hours to make sure that work was being done. I credit them a lot. At the same time, they were still able to do the work to move us forward. Maybe some of the work wasn't as fast as we had intended before the pandemic struck, but it certainly has been moving forward. And as far as developing regulations after legislation is put in, that's normal business of government. The member will know that his own government did things the same way. And as critic, I probably complained about it, but that's the way things are done. The things that were affecting folks, we were grandfathering certain processes along the way while we took the time to develop the regulations in a comprehensive way. And that grandfathering, for some instances, will go till the end of December. But I'm looking forward to this summer because I think everybody will be happy with where we've landed. And I think the flexibility that we've shown, the acknowledgement of needs of families around the province will be there. And I think that we've also gone farther than the previous government as far as acknowledging the needs of the people of British Columbia.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for her answer. Without getting too far into the weeds of who actually sits on the ALC and makes decisions, my dad, of course, was the chair of the ALC at one time. And back then, he made sure that all the members were actual bona fide farmers that understood what it was like to be a farmer, what it was like to make a living farming, what it was like to have housing on farms. So what I'm looking at with this intentions paper now is how big can the secondary residence be? How big could the third residence be if a third residence was granted on a bona fide farm? Then my other question along with this one would be, now we've transferred, and I would think that the Land Commission commissioners would be the people that are educated about farming and agriculture in BC that could make rational decisions about whether a bona fide farm or landowner should have a second house or a third house. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, Chair, through you to the Minister, that local governments will now take that decision, and I've been involved in local governments and throughout this province. We're going to get people on local city councils that don't understand agriculture, that are going to see the fear of a second or third house on a farm and suddenly turn that down. So through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, what happens when a bona fide farmer with a bona fide claim for a second or third house is turned down by his local government? Where does it go from there?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. All applications need to be authorized by local government. That's never changed. That's always been consistent throughout governments.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that, but that didn't really answer my question. If it's up to local government now to make the decision whether a bona fide landowner can have a second house or a third house, if the local council in Coquitlam or Surrey or Abbotsford or Delta decides, whoa, we don't want to see that, where does the landowner go from there with an application for a second or a third house? Can he now go to the, or he or she go to the Land Commission for a second opinion over and above the local government?
Minister.
Thank you. I think I understand the question, but if I answer incorrectly, the member can try again, and I'll try again. So previously, under the member's government, local government made the decision whether or not to approve a secondary home or a third home. They made the decision. Now, an application needs to be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission so they can make that decision. So the Agricultural Land Commission, so if we're talking about farmers, we're not talking about non-farmers. If a farming family put forward an application for a second or third home to local government needs to forward it to the commission. They can decide not to if it doesn't comply with their local bylaws that they've developed or their land use zoning that they've developed. But local government previously could not approve an application for a second or third home at their level. Now it goes to the commission, but the local government can still decide not to forward that application. If local government decides not to, the member asked what was the recourse after that, and that would be a judicial review, and that's no different than under the previous government.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that answer. I will probably ask one more question. I'll turn it over to my colleague from the BC Green Party. I'd like to get an answer on what size, based on the intentions papers coming out, the second home would be, or a third home if that was approved on a farm. And my question through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, under Section 25 of the Agricultural Land Commission Act, they must not grant permission for an additional residence unless the additional residence is necessary for a farm use. My question through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, will the Minister tie upcoming changes to secondary housing to farm use?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So, two ways at coming at this. I think the last question was, will the additional residents be tied to farm use for non-farming families? And no, it won't. There will be no tie to farm use for secondary residents. As far as size, that is just being finalized right now for non-farmers. The size of the secondary residence for non-farmers is being discussed right now, so I can't bring that forward to you. But if you're farming and you're a farming family and you need an additional residence, there is no size prescribed. That goes forward to the Agricultural Land Commission, and they base it on the need for farming. So there is no size that's prescribed if you're a farmer.
Thank you, Member. So now recognizing the leader of the third party.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and glad to be here to have an opportunity to ask the Minister of Agriculture some questions. I'm actually just going to start with a bit of drawing a picture of various places in my riding, all of which are on ALR land. So at the far south end of the riding, there's a piece of property where the owner has for years been involved in seeing soil coming into his property, soil leaving his property, all sorts of disturbances, community continuously raising concerns about what's happening on this property. He ultimately got a permit for some trout ponds on his property, 6 trout ponds, but proceeded instead to build a lake. And now on a piece of ALR land in Shawnigan Lake, there is a brand new lake. He has just recently, and I just got the photos today from a community member, put the buoys in for his water ski lake on his ALR land, for which he does not have a permit, for which I can say at least 3 provincial ministries, Agriculture, Environment, Forest Lands, Natural Resources, are engaged at some capacity, but none have prevented what basically the whole community knew was going to happen, which was he built the lake he wanted. Now let's go a little bit north from there and out to the west to Kingburn, where for well over a decade now, community members there have raised concerns continuously about another landowner on ALR land who has quarried. And after 10 years of quarrying, finally the Ministry of Mines determined that yes, indeed, this is a quarry, not a pond, and brought this landowner into compliance by allowing him to go through a quarrying permit process after he'd been quarrying for 10 years. These community members continue to raise many, many concerns about activities on this landowner's several properties, including things that he's done in the past, burying a variety of things, including the latest round, I think, was chicken carcasses. And the community members connected to these, around these 2 properties and affected by the activities on these ALR lands by these landowners have felt and experienced for many, many years a lack of responsiveness from the regulatory bodies that are meant to be ensuring that people are following the rules on the land that they own according to the rules and regulations that exist. Move a bit more north, and I get to a constituent recently moved to the valley, has a 7-acre plot, perfect for farming. They've built a coop, have a flock of chickens. They're starting to grow food and fruit, beehives, supporting pollination, collect honey. This is what I think we would like to see a lot more of on agricultural land. The constituent's mother suffered a series of strokes, and they are looking to have their parents live close by with them. They are permitted by the local government, the regional district, to have a building of 960 square feet, but they've run into a difficulty with ALR rules, and they have been told by the ALC that they could have a manufactured dwelling, but they cannot build a second dwelling. And then I'm going to go to the further north end of the riding out to Maple Bay, where a farm has been operating, growing meat and vegetables and produce. And because they were selling pizza,
Birch Cove.
boy, did the rules ever come clamping down on them.
Such a shame.
And so they were not allowed to continue selling pizza or having events which would supplement their income and revenue as farmers growing food in the valley, contributing to our food security locally. I paint this picture because on the one hand, we have people growing food and contributing to food security, contributing to the community, and the rules for them are enforced quite fiercely. Nope, your parents who you want to have live with you can only live in this particular type of dwelling, even though the local government rules indicate differently. And then, no, you can't have an event or sell pizza to supplement your income. At the other end, we have landowners on agricultural land where rules are flouted with a kind of astonishing impunity. I mean, we're not talking about selling pizzas. We're talking about digging quarries without permits. We're talking about burying waste. We're talking about building a lake without a permit. And so my question for the minister is, how do we reconcile the lack of consistency with which rules are enforced? And when we have something like a lake that gets built, and that isn't enforced compared to pizza sales, what do I say to constituents about what the expectation should be around the enforcement of rules, particularly given the dramatic difference in impacts that these behaviors, that these landowners are having on their communities and their neighbors? I guess that's my starting point.
Minister.
Sorry to interrupt your conversation. Thank you, Chair. So I absolutely understand the member's frustration on these files, and it was an interesting way to lay out the problem. I appreciated that. Thank you very much. I can talk to you about let's talk about the lake first. So aquaculture is permitted on the ALR. You are allowed to have fish ponds. But given the story that the member has explained today, I can let her know that there's an active investigation underway by DFO, and I'm not sure if we may be able to arrange a briefing, but it's an active file, so I'm not sure how much more information can be disclosed at this point. It's a shared jurisdiction between DFO and Flinroe, but as far as the fish go, that's a DFO issue. So happy to get more information on that, but that's where it stands there. The common thread through all of these things is that the Agricultural Land Commission is actively involved to the point where they can be. And so obviously, you know, they can't override DFO on a fish matter, but sometimes because things work slowly, it looks like they're not active and there isn't anything being done, but they are actively involved. I can tell the member that. And as far as the quarry goes, again, the ALC has been actively involved since 2011, trying to deal with the compliance and enforcement issue, but because there's different jurisdictions involved, it's a difficult file. But they've come in and out of the file as their jurisdiction is apparent, but it's a work in progress and it's slow. So that's all I can say about that. The issue about the secondary accommodation on a farm to help support the farming operation given the needs of the family, that's exactly what we're addressing in our residential flexibility regulatory changes that we're hopefully be able to announce this summer. We know that the needs of farmers go farther than helping in the field, doing daily farm chores. There's a lot there, and a lot of farming families want to stay together. If you're a farming family, a current farming family, you can apply for as many residences as you need to support the farm. But we also recognized after doing our tour around the province that there's many people that live on the agricultural land reserve that also need residential flexibility. And so we've addressed that. We're addressing that currently in our regulatory changes, and I think it'll be good news for folks. The one thing that we always want to make sure of is that we're not taking away the value of the agricultural land. And I know with the members' examples of laying that out, there's 2 examples where agriculture is not the primary activity. So that's frustrating, but from the position of the Ministry of Agriculture, we're doing what we can to address the needs of family members, farming families, and families that aren't farming, while also taking note of what needs to be done as far as compliance and enforcement. We've tried our best to address soil dumping, etc., and that's where we can come at it from, but I do understand the frustration in the bigger picture from the member. And as far as the activities that are happening on the ALR, so the member brought up a pizza place. The Agricultural Land Commission is complaint-based. So if something is addressed, it means either a neighbor or a resident complained, or a group of residents complained about the activity, or local government complained about the activity. We know in one case that was highly publicized, the business didn't have a local government permits for their buildings. And so we don't ever override local government needs and bylaws. Permits are in place for a reason at the local government level, and we expect those to be in place before other activities are allowed, and that hasn't changed. So there might be more that the member needs, but that's probably all I can give right now.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the Minister's engagement and response. I guess then taking it to the level of tools available to the Agricultural Land Commission. So in the case of the property with the lake, for example, we hear, well, this is under investigation, or there's several ministries involved, although often what happens is it's ALR land, so ALC has, the kind of final say, or they're the overarching agency, regulatory body that's looking at this. And then we hear, well, we don't have the tools to really compel compliance or to ensure that there's enforcement of the rules and guidelines. So what's interesting about the minister's response is, on the one hand, if you have the pizza oven or the family that are really with the second dwelling, who really want to follow the rules, who really want to know the rules, those compliance and enforcement tools aren't really that necessary, because people are doing their best to abide by the rules. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, where blatant and pretty flagrant non-adherence to rules and regulations. And then what we hear is, well, we just don't have any tools to stop, the lake from getting built. And yet at every step, the community kept saying, this is what's coming, this is, surely there's a way to. So the question I have is, one, are there enough compliance and enforcement officers for the ALC currently, and particularly for say the Vancouver Island region? And two, do they have the regulatory tools that they need to be able to prevent the kinds of activities that we're seeing in our riding, and I'm sure in ridings all over the province?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a bit of information I'm going to read into the record for the member, and of course we can always meet about this at a later date if it's not enough. So from the beginning of 2020 to 2021 fiscal year to February 19th, 2021, 1.4% of all active C&E files resulted in an enforcement order. So 10 orders out of 740 active files. Comparatively, in the last fiscal 30 or 4% of enforcement orders, on 4% of files, enforcement orders were issued. As of February 19th, 2021, there are currently 287 active complaints and 270 active referrals to make a total of 557, compared to a total of 476 active complaints or referrals at the end of 2019-2020. The active file load is currently 17% higher than the total for the last fiscal year. As of February 19th, 2021, the total number of files closed is 183, compared to 245 at the end of 2020-2021. The total on February 19th, 2021 is 25% lower than the total for the entirety of the last fiscal year. I also wanted to mention that as of February 2021, the breakdown of all active cases in populated regions, so this gives the member an idea of where these are happening. 49%, or 362, are in the South Coast region, 21%, or 154, in the Okanagan region, and 19%, or 143, in the Island region. So that's a total of 740. I wanted to just make the point that given the number of files that are opened, often working with the landowners, they voluntarily come into compliance, and you can see the great majority of these complaints are fixed. But we have some tough files, and so it's not perfect. The member asked whether or not we had enough in compliance and enforcement, and I would say we probably never could. Given some of the tougher files, I don't know if that would necessarily make the difference. But we do have compliance and enforcement officers all around the province. Could we use more? Probably.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think this is my last question because of my time here. I'll just end with a follow-up on that. Do the officers have the tools they need to achieve the compliance other than voluntary? And like I said, I'm aware that most people do want to be in compliance. They voluntarily will do that. And then you have these people that clearly don't. And do the officers have the appropriate tools? And I'm just going to end with one other question, and related to food security generally, and to farmers. I just got an email from some farmers in my riding, some friends of mine, the Lockwoods. They were the Young Farmers of the Year a couple years ago. They have an amazing farm with chickens. I've taken my classes there. They're quite an amazing family. But Cammie just posted about how it looks like they're not going to keep growing produce. They're just going to pare down. They have a lot of chickens. Because it's just not economical for them to grow that produce. It's and she lays it out quite well. I mean, they go to the markets, and there's the co-op, the Cowichan co-op for farmers. There's CSA, and so there are these measures, but it still makes it very difficult for the Lockwoods to be able to justify the cost and the expense of growing it when they aren't making that back in revenues. And so I guess my question is just more on a higher level, but we all at the beginning of COVID talked about food security a lot and how important it is. We saw grocery stores shelves empty out, and heard about food shortages and saw things, yeast flour, things that we couldn't get our hands on, hence the sourdough starters. And I guess my question is around squaring the kind of high-level goals of food security with the reality that farmers are experiencing, especially younger farmers who are like the Lockwoods. I guess I'm just sort of curious about the minister's vision for how to actually further increase our food security and find ways that farmers who are growing incredible food like the Lockwoods are don't give up, because that's the last thing we want to see is a loss of that kind of farming activity and contribution to our food security locally and provincially. So I'll just look for the minister's thoughts and ideas on that.
Minister.
Thank you. Through the chair, so the commission has enforcement orders and administrative penalties, but I guess I can say, as far as is there enough compliance and enforcement tools, one of the best tools that they have is their partnership with local government, and we can see that in the member from Delta's riding. Delta took soil dumping very seriously, and they were an excellent partner working with the Agricultural Land Commission. And so I think that's where the comfort zone is for the Agricultural Land Commission, is that, and also just a good relationship with the community. As I said before, the community is the eyes and the ears, but sometimes, as the member has pointed out in 2 specific instances, that doesn't work. Those are really tough cases. In some cases, situations have to go to court, but the vast majority are solved just by the ALC working with the landowner that may be out of compliance or maybe having the complaints. And so, but I take the member's point. As far as CAMI goes, love those guys. I saw them on Salt Spring last summer celebrating their anniversary, actually. They work really hard, and they've got an amazing operation that they're doing. almost everything that the ministry is putting their energy into is around food security. We had to shift the ministry from a very internationally based market focus to the domestic market. I've often said, the members probably heard me say it more than enough, but changing the direction of the ministry in that way is like trying to turn a cruise ship around. It's really hard to get it going, but then once it's moving, the successes come much more quickly and much more easily. So we try to have in place everything that farmers need for supports in our Grow BC pillar, and that means obviously protecting the agricultural land reserve, but bringing opportunities to farmers, making sure that they've got the resources they need to succeed in the best way that we can provide them. In some cases, it's monetary support. In many cases, it's educational support. And in some cases, it's being the wind at their back and making sure that we've got programs that are highlighting what they're doing and encouraging them. Our Feed BC program is specifically designed to add value to what farmers are doing. The more we can get that into place, into post-secondary institutions, we're at the point where we'll almost have all of our health authorities on board. That's moving produce, meat, all of the things that we produce here in the province through a very stable domestic market. But then we are also putting in food hubs that also take primary goods and add value to them. As far as farmers go, I've been reaching out obviously to farmers nonstop over the last year. Many of them have reported that this has been their best year fiscally because there's been so much awareness from consumers that consumers want to buy local, they want to support farmers. And I don't know the business plan that CAMI has. I can't speak specifically to why there's challenges there, but we've got an amazing business support team within the ministry, and if there is particular barriers that they're coming up against, we'd love to chat with them and find out how we can assist. But generally, people are saying that they've sold more. People that operate CSAs are saying they've got more customers than they can handle. When it comes down to it, there's things that are not necessarily in our control. Labor forces. We bring in about 11,000 temporary foreign workers to help us with agriculture. It's because we can't get domestic labor. The minimum wage just went up, which is I've heard from some farmers is difficult for them, but it's hard work out in those fields, and people deserve to get a fair wage at the same time. And so there's a lot of things at play, but I think we're trying our best right now within the ministry to absolutely support a growing domestic market, making sure it's stable, and then being able to take advantage of international markets when we can. But if you don't have a good foundation, you can't build a fancy kitchen. Like we've spent the last 4 years making sure the supports domestically are there, and we're seeing a lot of successes. But in particular with CAMI, love to have the conversation, see what we could do to support.
Recognizing the member for Delta South.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and getting back to just a little bit more about Bill 52 and housing issues. So I think one of my final questions on the housing issue, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, can you please confirm to me that if you're a bona fide farmer and you want to build a secondary home or a third home, but you have the ability to build for family members or for farm help or for temporary farm labor, that if the local government does not like what they see, they have the ability to kill it, and that's the end of the story. It goes no further after that. Is that true, or can it be looked at as secondary by the Agricultural Land Commission?
Minister.
Thank you. No, there is no appeal process, and there never has been.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that answer. I'd like to move on to a quote, and this is not from me, this is from the BC Cattlemen's Association, and it's about non-farm income value added on farms. The BC Cattlemen's Association says non-farm income often speeds the ability to grow and expand ranch operations and self-insuring against market fluctuations. Non-farm income is necessary in most agricultural operations. So their recommendation is to remove restrictions for bona fide ranching and farming operations on deriving non-farm income from their farm properties, as long as the productive capacity of the land is not diminished beyond a threshold footprint based on a percentage of the parcel area. So through you, Madam Chair, to Minister, would you agree with this recommendation from the BC Cattlemen's Association that it's high time the ALC begins to understand the value of value-added opportunities on BC farms and ranches?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through to the member, I'm not really sure where that quote is pulled from specifically, or if it's out of context, because many farmers, and I'm sure the BC cattlemen are aware of this, many farmers have secondary businesses operating on their farms. We see it all over the place, and it's allowed. You can find mechanics bays on the side of barns. You can find a lot of these things happening almost, I'd say, in every region. And it's additional income for farmers. The only basic premise is that it can't take away from the primary activity of farming. And so it already exists. So maybe the member could give me some more guidance through the chair to what context they were speaking about.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, we must be living on different planets, because in my term as an MLA and the agriculture critic, I am inundated with people that are so frustrated with agritourism that's been shut down in this province. The leader of the Green Party just talked about Bird's Eye Cove pizza nights that's been shut. How can we say that these things are allowed? We see time and time again of businesses, of value-added businesses that are shut down by the Agricultural Land Commission throughout the province. The Hop Festival was shut down. Man Farms had ALC all over them in Abbotsford. The Glow event was shut down. Petey's Pumpkins was shut down. The Rusted Rake was shut down. Bird's Eye Cove pizza nights were shut down. The Abbotsford Gleaners, the Women's Shelter. I could go on and on. I have a quote here from Mike Smith on CKNW about the women's shelter in Abbotsford, and I'm going to talk about the Gleaners as well. Michael Smith says it's kind of unusual and an uncomfortable spot for the NDP. Obviously, traditionally big supporters of women's transition homes and that kind of thing, to be saying, oh yeah, you can't have this women's center on agricultural land. I did talk to the people who run that Abbotsford facility, and these are Mike Smith's words again. And as usual in these cases, they say the land is designated as agricultural land, but it's rocky. It's not really suitable for farming, and the women who are in this shelter are learning some gardening skills and stuff like that. So maybe there is an agricultural component, but it still doesn't meet the rules. So my question to the minister, can we start with the women's shelter in Abbotsford? Why has it been shut down, and has it been granted a reprieve by the ALC to start up again?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the member. So I don't think we're living on different planets. I mean, that opportunity might come up eventually, but it's not here yet. I think we also, through the chair, the member and I share the idea that agriculture is an incredible economic driver in our province. We both support farmers, we support farming activity, and I think we also share the idea that the Agricultural Land Reserve was put in place to protect land, and at the same time we also need to find ways to encourage farming. I think we share that value. So when the member comes forward with examples that don't necessarily, there's a lot to each application. So the member tries to make it very simple, like it was a simplistic situation and the ALC just came in and shut them down. There's a lot of detail that goes with each application. And my point is that the Agricultural Land Commission looks at each application individually and they make a judgment on those applications. And so we know that secondary activities on farmland can't take away from the primary farming activity. You can do value added as long as you're using 50% grown on the farm. So I'm not sure where the member thinks we are on different pages on this. I think we share those same values. I don't think the member would want to see activities that have nothing to do with farming overtake a farm and take it out of production. He's from dairy. You can talk to dairy farmers. They protect that land. They grow what they need from that land. They house their animals on that land, and any activities that happen on the land base around, for example, a dairy farm, can be a detriment to that farming operation. So we have to be really careful about what's allowed and what's not allowed on the ALR. Having an enormous festival beside a dairy farm would be difficult for the dairy farm owner to manage because of his or her livestock. So I think we're on the same page, and so to make it seem like we're speaking a different language I don't think that's accurate. To go back to the member's question about the Women's Centre, they were found to have a grandfathered use last year, and so that file has been closed for quite some time.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as I understand it, the Agricultural Land Commission and the commissioners make their decisions based on the framework that the minister put in place with Bill 52 and Bill 15. Through you to the minister, I don't know if the minister has visited the site. And I'm going to make a bit of a statement here first before I go to my question. And having understood agriculture fairly well, I think, in this province, and having traveled throughout not only North America, but parts of the world to understand agriculture, I understand what it's like to farm in California, in eastern Washington, and Nebraska, and Oklahoma, and Iowa, and Saskatchewan. We are not Saskatchewan or Oklahoma or Nebraska. We are a small province made up of mountains and rivers and oceans and streams and a lot of rocky parts of land that ended up in the agricultural land reserve. What I'm simply saying is we need to give opportunities for people to, I want to see agriculture flourish in this province, but we need to see the opportunity for people to make use of parts of farms and ranches in this province that are not actually useful for agricultural purposes. And the minister, through you, Madam Chair, likes to always talk about almost every piece of land in the agricultural land reserve that is farmable. That's not the case in this province. And if we visit the women's shelter and the Abbotsford Gleaners, we go almost to the U.S. border at the end of Sumas Way. And here's this long gravel driveway that goes up to a mound of rock. That at the top of this mound is this wonderful Christian group of elderly folks that have been there working so hard to put soup mixes together with Gleaners items of peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers and all the different things that they glean. And then they have this wonderful Christian-based women's shelter on top of this rocky mound, which is totally unfarmable. So again, to the minister, could she please tell me what the status is of the Abbotsford Gleaners Society and the fact that they simply wanted to add on an addition to their facility for some new washrooms, I think, and a change room. And what is the status of the women's shelter? I'm trying to figure out what the answer is through you to the minister. Is the women's shelter still there and continue to operate without being closed down?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So, through the Chair, the Gleaners application and the Women's Center application were submitted together. They were connected, and because of that, it made it complicated. The Women's Shelter specifically was declared a grandfathered use. It was in existence before 1972. It was declared a grandfathered use, and I don't think there was any interruption in service there. It continues to operate now. So there's that. And then the Gleaners as well have continued to operate.
All right. Members, we will now take a 5-minute recess while we undertake cleaning and safety protocols of preparation for a new committee chair.
I call Committee of Supplies, Section C, back to order. We're currently considering the budget estimates of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. I now recognize the member for Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to the Minister, a quick question. Very controversial in the media, of course, rusted rake, and as the leader of the Green Party just said, Bird's Eye Cove Farm pizza nights. Are both these facilities still closed down by the Agricultural Land Commission?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the members. So on, as far as I know, on Rusted Rake, they've applied for a brewery license, and I don't think the Agricultural Land Commission has been involved with them for a little while. They're probably with the trying to get a liquor license, so I can't tell you if they're up and running, but I know that's in process. And then for Bird's Eye Cove, they were approved to do 30 events, special events. I think they might do weddings. 30 events. They were approved to have a cookhouse as long as it complies with the District of North Cowichan's rules, and two short-term accommodation facilities. So I don't know if they're working right now or what's happening, what activity is happening there, but they were approved for those activities.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to the minister, I think the minister would understand that I'm a huge, and perhaps she is too, a huge proponent of agritourism in this province, and I see that especially in my riding of Delta. The next generation of young farmers that have come along and suggested to their parents, look, why don't we try something different with our strawberries and raspberries and our you-pick potatoes and you-pick blueberries and all these different things. And we're seeing this all over the province, but I fear for the risk of the ALC coming in and doing what they've done to some of these other facilities. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, does the ALC see in future some of these great agritourism projects taking place, thinking outside the box, value added to the farm operation, and yet with that we have to certainly park cars? And I'm asking if in the regulations, is there anywhere in the ALC regulations that says that these value-added agritourism cannot park cars on the farm that they're providing this agritourism event on?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the member. So as far as agritourism practices go, there is no allowable use being a parking lot, but the Agricultural Land Commission deals with parking lots and agritourism all the time. You can apply for a notice of intent to the commission to get space for parking. Of course, they're always concerned about a parking lot taking away from the capacity of the farmland and it being a permanent structure or being in place in a permanent way. And I think the member would also agree that a lot of the agritourism events, you see cars parking on the grassy fields, and then you expect them that they would move on and you would continue to be able to farm in that area. But as far as there being a permanent parking lot available for agritourism, no.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. So just to clarify, I do totally understand we don't want to cover up permanent soil-based farmland with gravel for parking lots, but just to redo the question, if it's just temporary for, say, a season of 2 or 3 months to park on some pasture land, that would be acceptable, I think, if there's no damage to that land and it continues on as useful agriculture past that 2 or 3 month period.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To the member. So if you have something like I described, a big field where cars go and park for a temporary agritourism event, the member mentioned 3 months. You don't need, you can do it. As long as it's temporary, you can do it. You do have to file for a notice of intent if you're going to be bringing in gravel or fill to aid in the building of that parking lot. That would be that would still be a temporary situation. But if you're not adding more fill or adding gravel, you're absolutely allowed. You don't have to apply for anything.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that response. One more quick question before I move on to another. I've only got about 17 topics and we're on topic number 1, I think. Through you to the Minister, as I've said, I really believe in the value-added business on farms. Like I said, on Westham Island, I could count 3 or 4 businesses that are just so busy, so many city folks that come out to do U-Pick and, you know, strawberry milkshakes and raspberry sundaes and blueberry this and that. It's just fantastic what's going on. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, you know, moving forward with some of the controversy we've seen with pumpkin patches and Christmas festivals, does the Minister believe that agritourism is something we really need to focus on and make a reality moving forward for farmers in BC?
Minister.
Thank you. To the member, agritourism is permitted in the legislation. It is a reality.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wasn't really the answer I was looking for. I was looking for her commitment to see it flourish in the future. But moving on, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, Back in October 28th exactly of 2019, we had a protest out at the back of Bill 52. People that were very upset with Bill 52. It was a protest on the back steps, huge turnout. And that very same day, Mr. Chair, the government had an amendment to the Trespass Act, and the only thing they added to that amendment was the word airplane. One of our members came forward with a private member's bill that would substantially enforce the Trespass Act and make it absolutely impossible for people to come on and interrupt families and operations and interrupt biosecurity by coming onto farms that aren't personally cleanly and without disease to be tracked onto farms. So that evening, Mr. Chair, over at the Grand Pacific Hotel was a huge banquet, a social gathering of all the members that came over from BC Ag Council. And there was probably 350 people in the room, all farmers in BC. And the Minister of Agriculture got up on the stage with the Attorney General and the Solicitor General and made a great speech the day that our member put forward a private member's bill to try and enforce the Trespass Act. And the Minister of Agriculture and the Solicitor General and the Attorney General said, we are here tonight to support all you farmers and ranchers in BC, and we will toughen up the Trespass Act here in British Columbia. My question to the Minister, what measures have been taken to implement the statements of October 28, 2019 to bring forward new legislation that will be in line with Alberta and Ontario to toughen up the act of trespass on our farms and ranches in BC?
Minister.
Thank you to the member. So in October, myself and two other ministers issued a joint statement supporting BC livestock producers and to send protesters a message that while they might have the right to peaceful protest, government does not support extremist actions or violations of farmers' privacy. The ministry has met with representatives of the livestock sector and producers who have experienced extremist protest events to hear their concerns. The ministry also organized and participated in roundtable discussions between multiple branches of government and external stakeholders beginning in October, carrying forward to 2021. There is currently a draft of an animal activism action plan and a policy analysis circulating to begin the discussions between the ministry and other branches of government and external stakeholders regarding further mitigation of animal activism impacts on livestock producers within BC. An industry-based steering committee has also been established with representation from the BC Agriculture Council, dairy, beef, poultry, pork, and equine sectors. The committee provides input on the animal activism action plan, and anyone with concerns about the welfare of specific animals is asked to call the BC SPCA. They are mandated by government under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to respond to animals in distress.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the minister, what is the current punishment for people or activists caught trespassing on farms or in our processing plants? The fines that would be handed out or possibly jail time?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To the member, there is a violation ticket of $115, and then a court can decide, a judge can decide if there's any further penalties after that. And then the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act has among the strongest penalties in Canada for causing distress to animals, up to $75,000 and 24 months in prison.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to the minister, can you tell us then, there's been changes, hard rock changes in Alberta and Ontario. Can you tell us what the changes are in Ontario and Alberta versus what we still have in British Columbia for trespass and biosecurity on our farms?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, through to the member. So I can give the member a cross-jurisdictional comparison. Since 2019, the provinces of Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Quebec have all made legislative changes in response to extreme animal activism. Manitoba is currently in the process of public engagement on this issue. Ontario is the most recent province to address extreme animal activism with legislative changes. The Ontario Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act was passed in June 2020 and came into force on December 5th, 2020. The Ontario government considers these changes necessary to improve working conditions for farmers, farm families, and agri-food sector employees, and to protect the food supply chain while not curtailing a person's right to legally protest. In all provinces that have made recent changes, police are empowered to enforce the relevant legislation. Relevant legislation is typically related to trespass. Some jurisdictions additionally specify farmed animal zones, i.e., farms animal processing facilities, and provide enhanced protection in those zones. For example, increased penalties in those zones in comparison to trespass outside the farmed animal zones. In BC, our work is in progress, and we're currently looking at all regulatory powers that we have.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, again, I think we have broken promises by this government. Coming up in October of this fall will be 2 years since that glorious statement that night to all the farmers and ranchers in the room that we will deal with this issue. My question is, will the minister outline steps she has taken this year to uphold her promises that evening to farmers and ranchers and fishers to make the necessary changes to the Trespass Act or any other act that ensures the safety of farm families and the biosecurity of their farms? In other words, Mr. Chair, when are we going to see some legislation come forward that will support the statements that were made that evening in October of 2019?
Minister.
Thank you. So there has been a lot of work that's been going on. And of course, I know the critic doesn't like it when I say this, but the pandemic slowed down some of that work because a lot of it was consultation with stakeholders. So we did the best we could under those circumstances, but things have picked up again in January. A policy paper was written to address the need identified and serve as a foundational document to create common understanding within the ministry, support the work stemming from the British Columbia Animal Activism Roundtable, and inform the ministry's regulatory and/or operational initiatives to address animal activism with a farmed animal focus. We've gone out to the working group, asked them for feedback on the policy paper. As well, I know that staff have been meeting since January with dairy, with BCAC, with the cattlemen's, with poultry, engaging them in the issue to talk about the best way to address this issue. And then we've also been working with the RCMP and the police. One of the ideas that was brought forward, which is a simple improvement, I think, it's not a fix, but it's an improvement, is putting people with farming backgrounds onto police boards to make sure that there's an agricultural lens when an incident happens, and educating the RCMP and the police boards around agricultural issues and animal activism from a farmer's perspective. So those things are undergoing, they're underway, and so we're continually engaging stakeholders on the policy paper right now.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, to the hog farmers and the poultry farmers and the dairy farmers that live in fear of groups invading their farms, scaring the heck out of their children, bringing biosecurity issues to these farms, I believe the mention was the fine right now could be $115. This is totally unacceptable. My question, once again, and last, Mr. Speaker, last year in estimates, the minister said that she had held 2 meetings regarding trespass back since 2019. So how many more meetings has she personally been involved in to try and deal with this issue? And when will we actually see legislation come forward? Because this is serious with agriculture in BC.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, to the members. So the first part of the question was how many meetings have I attended? Many, many, many meetings. This is an issue that comes up at many stakeholder meetings that I have continually. So that is the first part of the question. If I'm not meeting with them directly over this issue, I have fully engaged staff that work on this issue. As I've explained in my previous answer around the policy or the policy paper. And I just also wanted to point out that the fix may not include a legislative change. We may be able to do a regulatory change, and as the member knows, that would be a much faster process. A legislative change takes more time, and so we're making sure that we understand what our powers are within the regulations, that we can maybe move forward on a regulatory change instead.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we move on, one last question. Back in 2017, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, Mr. Weaver, the leader of the third party, brought forward a private member's bill 223, a right to roam. And I believe several NDP members were in support of this. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, are you in support of this private member's bill pertaining to ranch and agricultural private lands and the right to roam? And the second part of the question, for a quick answer, is do you support the overturn on the appeal of the Douglas Lake case that just came through a few days ago, that people do not have the right to enter the Douglas Lake to fish, that are not part of the property owners?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, to the member. So I don't recall all the details in a previous private member's bill. I didn't weigh in on it, so I don't think I can comment here. And then as far as the second part of the question, that's a recent decision and I haven't been briefed on it, so I won't be able to give an answer.
Member.
Thank you. Can I pass this a map over to the Minister, please? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. The Minister knows well that this is something that I go on and on about. Brunswick Point, a piece of land that was expropriated from the farmers in Delta back in 1969. Over 4,000 acres were expropriated back then for the expansion, possible future expansion of the Roberts Bank Superport, which did not take place. And of course, all the land was sold back to the original farm families except for 600 acres in Brunswick Point. Our government is committed, and these are the words of the Minister, our government is committed to helping farmers farm, and we are working to create a strong and resilient food system. So my question is, through you, Mr. Chair, will you commit today to agree with my statements that this land rightfully should be sold back to the original farm families who are still on the land, or at the very least, this land should remain as agriculture only and be held in perpetuity by the province for agriculture and wildlife habitat, and be leased back to the Delta farmers on long-term leases? My question through you, not only along with this question, is to the Minister, Mr. Chair, why will you not pull my private member's bill for debate on the Brunswick Point lands?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. To the member, the land remains in the provincial ownership as represented by the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, Crown Lands Branch. A separate court case is underway with regards to the 4 farming families, and it is inappropriate to comment on the status of these lands until the court decision is rendered. At this point, the province does not intend to remove Brunswick Point lands from the Agricultural Land Reserve. And for the same reasons why I can't comment on the lands due to the court case, I won't be discussing the private member's bill.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I provided a map of Brunswick Point to the minister, and I want to point out that in the purple is the existing expropriated lands of the Brunswick Point with the 5 farming families that are still on there. However, if we look at the yellow, which is very secretly has been slowly sold off to Tsawwassen First Nations in the yellow parcels on this map. Immediately to the east of Brunswick Point, of course, is the economic development of Tsawwassen First Nations. And I'm happy for Tsawwassen First Nations. They have made use of massive warehouses for economic development. Amazon is there. Many, many businesses are there. The shopping mall is there. But we cannot see this further erosion of farmland moving west towards Brunswick Point. My question through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister is the future of Brunswick Point. I'm so frustrated I can almost, I can't quite come out with a question, but I will point to a small triangular piece, and the family that lives along there wanted me to bring this up. It's called the Wedge Parcel, right at the end of Canoe Pass. You can see it, I think, Minister. Do you have any comment on that Wedge Parcel and where that specific piece of property is going to, and who's going to own that piece of property? The other comment, that's my question. One more comment, Mr. Chair, thank you, through you to the minister, is that unfortunately this is, I'm not sure how many estimates this is for me, and every time I've asked about Brunswick Point, I get told that the land will continue to be in the Agricultural Land Reserve. But we know that if it gets sold off to First Nations, suddenly the rules of the Agricultural Land Reserve are not abided by, and it can suddenly become used for other purposes other than the ALR.
Minister.
Thank you. Because the member has pointed out the wedge, I'm sure it's very significant, but I don't have any comment on it. I don't know the background on it. And then, given my previous statement that there's a court case underway, I can't make comment on the situation, on what may or may not happen with those lands. But I will say that I understand the member's passion about this agricultural land. I've seen it myself. I've been had a tour of it, but unfortunately, there's a court case underway. It's good quality farmland. It is. I know that. The member knows that, and the province does not intend to remove it from the agricultural land reserve because of that. And what happens in the future with if it changed ownership, if First Nations are granted ownership of that, then I don't know. I can't predict what could happen, what they would intend to use it for. But currently, it's in the agricultural land reserve, and there's rules around what can and can't happen with that land.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thankfully added to a standing committee on agriculture back in 2017, and we were summoned to travel the province, which is quite exciting. We were in a small plane and we went throughout the province. I can't even remember all the towns. We started in Vancouver Island with an abattoir in Comox. From there we went to Quesnel, we went to Cranbrook, Castlegar, Grand Forks. There was so many different places we went, and we met with farmers and ranchers and processors with small-scale meat production. It was very time-consuming. It took up a big part of my summer that year in 2018. Now, that's a long time ago. That's 3 years ago that we started the process of small-scale abattoir licensing and oversight and meat production. There was 23 recommendations came out of a report that we worked diligently on to come up with recommendations for the government or the Ministry of Agriculture to move forward on. So far, this report has basically collected dust. Farmers and ranchers and small-scale producers are waiting to see what we can do to add more licenses in this province. One thing I noticed, Mr. Chair, in my travels on a small plane is I would look down and I could see all over this province properties that you really could tell that they were 5 acres or 10 acres. This could be Quidel, it could be Vanderhoof, Prince George. And you look down and you'd almost could be assured that at one time there was sheep or livestock or cattle on those farms, but no longer, because these people have not the access to abattoirs to get these animals slaughtered and cut and wrapped. So my first question to the minister is, based on my time involved in this committee and the 23 recommendations that we put forward, can the ministers tell me what recommendations that she has looked at and confirmed and moved forward with our 23 recommendations from the Standing Committee on Agriculture on small-scale meat production?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that noise. The only person who gets through on my phone is my son, and so that's his bat signal to me. But anyway, it's under control. Okay, so getting back to what the member initially brought up with the work that was done on the Select Standing Committee for Agriculture, Fish and Food, it was excellent work. I'm so glad that we were able to convene a committee to go around and really do a deep dive on what's happening in the province around meat production. The reason why, I'll remind the member, the reason why we're in this situation is because drastic changes were made about 2009 around meat regulations, and it really impeded producers in local regions in producing meat. It dissuaded people from getting into the business, and the member's exactly right. You can fly over the province and probably pick out areas where there used to be livestock and there isn't. Just even on the Saanich Peninsula, where I make my home, I know people just walked away from it. It became very, very difficult. And so one of the first things that we were able to do as government is to bring back the Select Standing Committee on Agriculture, Food and Fish, which hadn't been in place for almost 16 years. So we didn't even have a Select Standing Committee that would deal with agricultural issues. So one was formed, and then I was very happy to be able to create a mandate that the committee would go out and talk to people, producers, consumers, etc. They came back with great recommendations. Great work was well done. I had undertaken a similar thing just on my own a few years before that, and I would have much preferred to be traveling with a group, but I could recognize it as a critic in doing my job and traveling around the province, specifically around meat production, that we needed to do something. Otherwise, we were going to lose a lot of knowledge around meat production and the interest, for sure. Since the recommendations have come in, we accepted all of those recommendations, and we've been working really hard to implement them. Some take longer than others, some are easier to do, but I can say that there has been a ton of work, and the improvements have been ongoing. The one thing that we have going for us right now as well is that there is high consumer awareness around where food comes from, and so the demand for local regional meat supply is there. We will be able to make some announcements this summer around some of those changes, but so recent updates to the ministry's meat inspection program include, as of December 1st, 2020, transition of oversight of Class D and E to the Ministry of Agriculture from health authorities was done, designated 3 new areas for Class D in June 2020, and reduced the travel time restriction where Class E's are allowed from 2 hours down to 1 hour in June 2019. We produced a very good What We Heard report. We went back out, we consulted continually with folks that were in the business. We looked at how do we increase support for people, how do we educate people on safe slaughter, how do we make the system more safe in general. Health and safety are always of utmost importance. And then we looked at new ways of embracing technology that would also be included in the changes we were going to make. So one of those things is a new remote inspection methods. We see doctors using cell phones to analyze disease. Why could the same thing not be done for folks out on farms? Why could we not use our phones to be able to identify diseases in meat production? So there's a lot of stuff that's been ongoing. I'm really happy about it. I'm excited about those the announcements that are coming up this summer, and I think the member will as well. I know it took a lot of time. It was, for some members, it was the first time they had been inside of abattoirs. It was a learning experience, but all of their time and energy that they put into it and the report is very much appreciated.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Minister for her comments. I must say I understand everything she was saying because I was actually there. I was part of this committee, and we looked at video inspection of small-scale slaughter. Of course, my comment was, as a dairy farmer, we had barn inspectors that would show up. We didn't know when they were coming, and it forced us to sort of stay on our toes and keep things clean and orderly. So my suggestion was that the Ministry of Agriculture should, and we know that we got away from the Ministry of Health with inspections, but the Ministry of Agriculture should spend the money to hire some more inspectors that just stop by every so often or contact the person with the DRE license or whatever it's going to be to say, you know, when's your next kill date? I'm going to stop by and have an inspection. So they're not there every day for 8 hours, but just something to keep everybody on their toes. Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, back in 2009, there was a risk assessment, and this was requested by the small-scale meat producers, and they had to actually make a file an FOI to obtain this risk assessment that basically said that there wasn't an issue with the safety of small-scale meat production in BC. So why did the Small-Scale Meat Producers Association have to make an FOI to gain this risk assessment?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To the member, could I just clarify something? The member said 2009. I'm wondering if that was the correct year.
Member.
Correct.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To the member, I'm actually not sure of what the rules were around FOIs back in 2009, so I don't think I can answer that accurately. I don't know why they would have had to do that.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving along with the topic of small-scale meat production, but also the topic of small farms and insurance. And I think the minister would understand that insurance is a huge topic right now amongst farmers and processors in British Columbia. I'm just quoting here from an article that was just in the Country Life newspaper that just came out a couple of days ago. And the gentleman Talks about the costs were compounded even further for those hosting farm events, keeping livestock, or with on-farm slaughter licenses. Furthermore, insurance for secondary dwellings continues to worry ALR landowners. The change under Bill 52 removed the option of replacement insurance for secondary dwelling. We have yet to see any recognition of the farm insurance crisis. One local farmers institute is calling on government intervention and negotiation on behalf of farms. Alternatively, the province has an opportunity to develop ALR-specific insurance programs as part of a comprehensive suite of business risk management programs. My question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, based on the issue of skyrocketing farm insurance rates for general farming and also for people that want to get into small-scale slaughter, what has the government done to address these insurance crises here in BC?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To the member. The member brings up a really good point. The cost of insurance globally is increasing and people are worried. I can assure the member that this is a topic that will be brought forward at the FPT meeting as we look at the next rounds of the business risk management programs.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very glossy booklet was put together called the Food Security Task Force. And I believe it was put together by 3 academics that possibly don't have a whole lot of farming background. But they traveled, Mr. Chair, throughout North America. I believe they traveled to Israel. I believe they may have traveled to Germany and Great Britain. But out of this task force, I'm always shocked, and I don't want to be too cynical, but as a farmer, salespeople are inundated with the latest in technologies in agriculture. When they come to their farm, they are extremely brilliant now as a salesman because they need to be brilliant to talk you into possibly purchasing the latest technology in farming, whether it's tractors, whether it's processing equipment, whether it's equipment for grading and washing and packaging potatoes, whatever. So there's no lack of new technology coming to the farmers of British Columbia. Now, on a scale of the size of agriculture, British Columbia would like to be the very end of a very slim needle. when compared to technology centers in the world, such as Germany and Holland and Israel and the Philippines, not to mention the universities in the United States, University of Nebraska, University of Oklahoma, Cal Poly, Texas A&M. The technology is huge out there from all these parts of the world and universities in the United States. My question is, why would the minister think that we should spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a crew of 3 people to put together a food security task force, thinking that BC should build an innovation center at the cost of millions of dollars, I'm sure, somewhere in the Fraser Valley, so that we could reinvent the wheel and be a leader in world agriculture technology here in British Columbia?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, to the member. So agri-tech and the discussion of food security is quite interesting. The member is correct. There were 2 academics that sat on the food security task force, and then another gentleman by the name of Peter Dillon, who's a large cranberry farm owner. He's a farmer slash business person. So they did make 4 recommendations. Some of that was around food sovereignty, food security. There was a recommendation to focus in on an institute that where agri-tech could be looked at from an academic level. But we also recognize that there is an enormous amount of agri-tech happening in British Columbia, in every region, in every type of agriculture. We also have incredible entrepreneurs who are spending their time inventing things that make agriculture work better. And when I say work better, I mean lower input costs, faster identification of disease, more concern and focus on improving animal welfare. There's so many examples where agri-tech is helping agriculture and in turn improving our food security. I'm really excited about some of the things that are going on. The member comes from a dairy farm, so one great example is a dairy farm here on in North Saanich. It's an incredibly old barn structure made of wood. It's been reinforced with metal, so it's a sound building, and the entire thing is filled with agri-tech in order how to manage the dairy. So the dairy cows have tags in their ears. They basically, their movement and their activities are picked up by the movement and the chips. They go through certain gates that allows them to go into a field if they've done all of their chores. It's an amazing dairy, and the level of animal welfare is very, very high. I'm really proud of that dairy, but it doesn't have everything to do with animals. It can also have a lot to do with produce that's being grown. We've got a company up in Salmon Arm that's focused on creating a robot that picks and packs mushrooms. The member will know how important mushroom farms are in our province, and they often have troubles and challenges around labor. So this robot is being designed to specifically assist our mushroom farms on labor shortages, and I think that's a great way to improve our food security. And so was it a meaningful task force that went out and really looked at issues and brought ideas back to us to consider? Absolutely. It was money well spent. Is agri-tech the end-all be-all to agriculture? No, there's lots of ways to do agriculture, but we're looking at ways to make agriculture better, and we don't want to turn our backs on ideas that are, we don't want the rest of the world to be the ones that have all the great ideas. We've got a lot of smart people here, and we want to make sure that we have a place for them to do their work. I'm going to just give one more example of agritech because I think it's really important. We've got drones that can identify powdery mildew on grape leaves faster than the human eye. It allows for vineyards around the province to use less inputs and get on top of disease faster than they ever have. And so that's the sort of thing, again, it's reducing the chemical dependencies in many, many places. And in my mandate, I have a task of creating a regenerative agriculture network. And all of these ideas, the old-fashioned ways of farming mixed with the high-tech ways of farming, are really going to allow us to move forward. The member says that on the importance of the BC agriculture sector in terms of the global outlook is quite small, but I have to say that the rest of the world knows how good the stuff is that we produce in British Columbia, and that's why when we're not in an instance of a pandemic, we have very strong international relations with people that want BC food, and we hope that we can grow that as well. But I think it's really important that we're making sure there's a place for this technology to happen.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for those responses, and I totally agree. Trust me, I keep up on pretty much every type of agriculture technology that's available in BC, including all this stuff in dairy farming that's quite amazing, with robotics, with sexing semen, with bands on a cow's leg to monitor how much movements it's making so you can tell if they're in heat, and so many different things. But Mr. Chair, however, the cost of this food security task force must be huge. And we already have, I believe it's 8 post-secondary institutions in BC that are dealing with agriculture with students between UBC. I actually participated in ag technology in a roundtable session in Abbotsford. I remember Dr. Ricky Yatta was one of the 3 of us that spoke about ag technology to an audience in Abbotsford. But the government has spent a huge amount of money on this food security task force with 4 recommendations. But not only the cost, I'm wondering what the total cost of all this was, but what's the future? Where is this? Is this another NDP task force that's gone out and done a huge glossy binder with these recommendations in it, and it says that we're going to have a new agricultural innovation center for technology, possibly in Abbotsford? So what's the future of this great task force report that came forward, and where would this innovation center be that's being planned as, I believe, recommendation number 4?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the member commented on a placement of food security, an agritech institute in the Fraser Valley, and I have to say there's been no indication that that's going to happen. But what is fair to say is that all post-secondary institutions will be engaged because they all have a lot to offer. So it will be a network. Where the bricks and mortar happen, I don't know. But we're creating this network to make sure that all of the cutting edge ideas come together and we can figure out what's needed, what needs to be supported, where the hub needs to be. But there's lots of areas around the province that are already doing it. We have a bit of a network up in Kelowna right now, and it's an exciting time. You know, there's even up in Salmon Arm, there's a company called Valid Manufacturing. They're creating equipment, centrifuges, to take care of dairy and dairy waste, dairy manure, to make sure that our aquifers stay clean. And it comes at a cost that a smaller dairy can afford. It can be moved between dairies, but it's things like that that are going to move our agriculture industry forward in a sustainable way. And we definitely want post-secondary to be partners.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A bit concerning in the report, and I'll start by saying my question through you, Mr. Chair. The report was 4 recommendations, and how many parts of the 4 recommendations have been complete, and what is the estimated timeline to complete the remaining parts? So that's my first part of the question. Secondly, was in the report, it said that they would like to see what's called an industrial agricultural zone, which could possibly take out 11,500 acres, or 0.25% of the ALR. And there was a letter written, this is quite amazing, by 23 names of very prominent agriculturists in BC. Art Baumke, Ron Bertrand, Richard Bullock, Wendy Holm, Kent Mullenix, Joan Sawicki, Brian Underhill, absolutely outraged by the thought that the NDP government, based on this food security task force, is going to look at an industrial agricultural zone which could take up to 11,500 acres of farmland out for ag industrial zones. So back to my question, Mr. Speaker, is how many of the 4 recommendations have been acted on by government?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the question. So I think the member can see, I'm not sure if he has a copy of the report, but recommendation 1 was applying the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to agricultural policies. 2, establishing an incubation acceleration strategy for BC's agritech sector. And 3, creating an agriculture and agritech institute in BC in partnership with post-secondary institutions. That work is ongoing. We accepted the recommendations, but we used them as guidance. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to say we're ticking them all off, but we definitely appreciated the input and the discussion around these issues. The 4th recommendation is one that we are having a conversation around that. We first had to understand what the barriers were for agritech companies setting up, and so the Food Security Task Force gave one idea of how they thought it could be handled. But right now, in a partnership with the Ministry of Jobs, we've created a concierge service, and every agritech company that wants to come to BC, we're using this concierge service to see what their needs are. Do they have land-based needs? Do they have an idea of where they want to operate? Is being in an urban center important to them? Could they operate in a rural center? So we're looking at land use issues right across the province and what they could offer agritech companies. But we see many agritech companies that don't have land needs. They need to find a spot to operate. A company like Terramera, for example, they prefer to be in the city. So we're really trying to understand what the actual needs are. So we appreciate all of the recommendations that came forward, and we use it to inform our investigation. But I'd say that it's a work in progress.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On a different topic, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, unfortunately, for the Minister's sake, there was some unfortunate posters put up around Victoria this past weekend. The Minister mentioned that mink farmers will have the support of agri-stability, and I understand our insurance risk management projects with agri-stability and production insurance. And agri-stability is obviously offered to mink farms, as with all farms that find that there's a depression in their average income over the years. And from what I've seen here, that the mink industry was granted with agri-stability payouts of $6.5 million over the past 6 years. My question through the chair is, will the mink farming industry continue to have the comprehensive support of agri-stability programs once the COVID-19 pandemic has ended? And where does the Minister see the industry of mink farming going post-pandemic?
Minister.
Thank you. And I will try my best to be quick. So the member will know that the federal government decides what farm commodities are, and in doing so, They decide who is eligible to receive agri-stability payments. Mink farming is one of those parts of the industry that has been identified by the federal government as a farm commodity. The member's correct that over the last 7 years, the agri-stability program has paid out about $6.5 million to the mink industry. 2.6 million of those dollars were from British Columbia, and I can give an example of how that looks. Last year, $52,000 was paid out through agri-stability to mink farmers. What the mink farming industry looks like after the pandemic, I can't tell the member what it would look like. Currently, there are concerns around COVID-19 and mink farming. That is being looked at by our public health officer. And so I can't foresee the future of mink farming. We're still in the pandemic, and that's our concern right now.
But not actually getting the answer I was hoping for. What I'm asking is, does the minister see the future of mink farming being the same as raising baby chicks up to become poultry, which we eat, raising young steer calves up to be 2 years of age and going to Cargill to become steaks in our grocery store shelves, young baby pigs being raised up? Does she see the future of mink farming on the same level as these other livestock producing businesses?
Minister, if you could maybe formulate an answer for tomorrow morning
I'm just going
with that question.
sentence.
Yes, perfect.
My previous answer holds.
I asked
Can I
them.
ask one quick softball, totally different subject.
It's up to the chief.
Softball.
Okay, we have 1 minute.
Mr. Chair. Through you to the minister, this is one of the craziest things that's come across. A hay sales company in Delta on Ladner Trunk Road got nailed $110,000 in back taxes they had to pay because they hadn't been charging PST on hay sales. All through this province, little companies that you see here and there that sell hay and pet food and all that have never charged PST on hay. And yet the Ministry of Finance nailed some of these guys, only one or two, all the rest got let go, but nailed this one friend of mine in Delta $110,000 because they did an audit and found that he hadn't been charging PST on hay. And believe it or not, it says PSC does not have to be charged on hay if the horses are used as a piece of farm equipment. In other words, if they're towing a plow or something, they don't have to charge PST. But if it's just a horse for pleasure or for riding, you have to charge PST. I'm asking if you could possibly talk to the Minister of Finance and get this straightened out. I mean, hay is hay for livestock. Surely we shouldn't be paying PST on hay for horses. Thank you.
What a softball question. Okay, can you?
The member would forward me an email outlining the problem, I'd be happy to bring it to the Minister of Finance.
Can you get him his $110,000?
I asked the minister to move the motion.
Honourable Chair, I move that the committee rise and report progress and ask leave to sit again.
Okay, members, a vote is about to take place, and those participating remotely should prepare their cards. Members, the question is that the committee rise, report progress, and seek leave to sit again. Those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, members. This committee now stands adjourned. Aye.